Have you ever wondered why a heart that has always healed others suddenly grows quiet, distant, and strangely powerful, as if something ancient has awakened inside it? There comes a moment when the empath stops absorbing the world's wounds and begins confronting the ones buried inside their own soul. At first, it feels like something has gone wrong. In truth, something profound has begun. What you are feeling is not collapse, it is emergence. And if you have reached this threshold, you are not losing your light, you are learning to wield your darkness. There is a psychological reason this phase arises. Jung understood that the psyche is not built merely to be kind, accommodating, and endlessly giving. The human soul is not a perpetual offering bowl. The persona, that carefully shaped identity of the gentle one, the healer, the understanding one, eventually cracks. And when it does, the shadow, long exiled beneath layers of compassion and self-sacrifice, begins to stir. The empath who has spent years translating other people's pain eventually encounters the uncomfortable truth: their own inner world has been neglected, silenced, even betrayed in the name of goodness. This is not selfishness. This is individuation. The unconscious does not forget. Every unmet need, every swallowed truth, every time they smiled while bleeding internalize those moments, sink into the depths of the psyche and wait. Not to punish, but to return, because wholeness cannot be achieved through selective kindness. The dark phase is not a breakdown, it is the soul's refusal to live divided any longer. What others call burnout, Jung recognized as a psychic rebellion against an imbalanced identity. This is the moment when the empath must stop performing warmth and finally become real. The first sign appears quietly. The empath who once rushed to soothe every emotional storm begins to withdraw. Silence replaces constant caretaking. They stop answering every late-night confession. They do not immediately rescue, mediate, or absorb. At first, they may feel guilty, as if they are committing a moral crime. Others may even accuse them of changing, of becoming cold or distant. But this withdrawal is not abandonment. It is reclamation. In the depths of the psyche, the empath senses that their endless giving has been a mask, a persona forged to be loved, accepted, and safe. Jung understood that what we repress does not die, it lives in the shadow, growing sharper, more insistent. The empath who withdraws is not rejecting love. They are rejecting the expectation that love must cost them themselves. Then comes the second sign: anger appears. Not explosive rage, not cruelty, a sacred anger. A threshold emotion. An empath in their dark phase begins to feel resentment toward being used, toward carrying emotional burdens that were never theirs to hold. This anger shocks them. They were taught that anger is dangerous, unspiritual, immature. But Jung knew that anger is often the voice of a neglected truth. It is the psyche saying, something is wrong. This is not a loss of compassion. This is a sign of emerging boundaries. The empath who finally says no, sometimes shakily, sometimes desperately, is not failing morally. They are waking up psychologically. They recognize how often they have been guilted, spiritually manipulated, emotionally drained in the name of kindness. The unconscious does not forget the moments when they spoke softly to preserve peace while their soul was screaming internally. This anger is not corruption, it is clarity. The third sign is even more unsettling. The empath begins confronting their shadow qualities: jealousy, pride, desire for power, desire to be seen, desire to be free. Feelings they once condemned in others appear within themselves, and instead of shrinking back, they look at them. This is where many fear they have become bad, but Jung would say the opposite. This is the beginning of authenticity. What others call hypocrisy, Jung recognized as the psyche tearing down false holiness. The empath realizes they were not purely selfless, they craved significance, belonging, admiration. They see the subtle ego hiding inside their kindness. This is not shameful, this is truth. To individuate is to integrate, not pretend. The empath who dares to see their own shadow becomes less sentimental, more honest, more dangerous in the best way, because now their compassion has strength rooted in awareness rather than in fantasy. Soon the fourth sign surfaces: they begin losing tolerance for one-sided relationships. They notice how often they listened but were never heard, supported but were never supported, loved deeply but were met with emotional convenience. They recognize patterns of narcissistic dynamics, power imbalances, emotional dependency cloaked in romance or friendship. What used to feel normal now feels unbearable, not because they've become bitter, but because they finally understand value. Jung understood that when the unconscious rises, life rearranges itself. People fall away. Conversations feel different. The empath who once begged to be chosen now quietly chooses themselves. This shift can terrify others. Those who benefited from their softness may panic, accuse or weaponize guilt. But something irreversible has awakened. What others call selfishness, Jung recognized as psychological maturity. This is the moment when the empath stops existing as emotional infrastructure for other people's lives and begins constructing their own. The fifth sign is the most dangerous and the most sacred. They begin to feel power, not dominance. Power, a grounded electricity in their presence. They no longer need to be liked. They no longer need to explain. Their energy is less absorbent and more sovereign. They stop merging with other people's pain. Instead, they witness it with clarity, discerning responsibility. They realize not every wound is theirs to heal. Not every broken person wants to grow. Not every cry for help is honest. Jung understood that the moment you integrate the shadow, you gain access to vitality. The empath who accepts their darker instincts not to act them out destructively, but to understand them develops psychological gravity. People feel it. Their quiet becomes commanding. Their words carry weight. They no longer speak from fragility, they speak from depth. This is not cruelty. This is integration. They are no longer a soft surface absorbing impact. They have become a presence that reshapes dynamics simply by existing honestly. Then arrives the sixth sign. They begin to experience synchronicities, strange yet meaningful alignments, internal revelations, dreams heavy with symbolism. Their psyche communicates more openly. It is as if the unconscious recognizes they are ready now. The empath in this dark phase often feels guided, not externally but internally, by an emerging inner authority, what Jung might liken to the anima or animus maturing, the inner counterpart stepping forward as a psychic ally. They sense deeper patterns in their relationships. They see archetypes at play. They understand that what they once called sensitivity was actually intuitive intelligence waiting for structure. This is not escapism. This is the psyche reorganizing. They begin engaging their inner world consciously, sometimes through active imagination, quiet contemplation, or deep emotional dialogue with themselves. And slowly, they stop being overwhelmed by their emotional world. They begin to navigate it. And there is a seventh sign, one that completes the arc. They learn to love differently, not as martyr, not as savior, but as whole human being. Their compassion becomes fiercer, clearer, less enabling. They can sit with another's suffering without losing themselves. They can offer support without surrendering self-respect. They can care deeply while saying, "This is where my boundary stands." What others call detachment, Jung recognized as the emergence of an integrated self, one that does not collapse into fusion or disappear in devotion. The empath who has entered their dark phase does not lose their tenderness. They refine it. Their love becomes a choice, not a reflex. Their kindness becomes strength, not submission. They discover they are capable of profound intimacy, but now it is reciprocal, grounded, and real. In this integration, everything that once felt contradictory begins to unite. The empath realizes they were never meant to choose between light and dark, softness and strength, compassion and truth. Jung understood that individuation is the union of opposites, sacred marriage within the psyche, where the rejected aspects return home and the persona loosens its grip. The empath who once lived to soothe now lives to be whole. They understand that boundaries are not walls, they are structures that allow love to survive. They recognize that their anger was a guardian. Their withdrawal was a healing retreat. Their shadow was never the enemy, it was the missing half of their soul calling them back. In the depths of the psyche, something profound stabilizes. They begin to trust themselves, not as fragile nurturers, but as capable beings who can hold darkness and light without being dominated by either. If you recognize yourself in this path, understand this: you are not broken. You are not turning cold. You are evolving. The empath who grows distant is not disappearing, they are gathering the fragments of themselves they once sacrificed. The empath who feels anger rising is not losing purity, they are reclaiming truth. The empath who confronts their shadow is not becoming dangerous, they are becoming whole. This dark phase is not a punishment. It is a rite of passage. It strips illusions, dissolves unhealthy roles, and demands that you finally belong to yourself. And when an empath belongs to themselves, they become one of the most powerful psychological forces in existence, a healed witness, capable of deep love without self-erasure. The world does not often understand this transformation. Some will mourn the version of you who made everything easier for them. Some will resent the loss of your compliance, but life will respond differently. Relationships that survive this phase become honest, balanced, and real. New connections form that recognize your depth rather than exploit it. And internally, something extraordinary unfolds. The empath who once feared their darkness begins to appreciate it as sacred fire, dangerous when ignored, transformative when integrated. Jung understood that the task of the soul is not to remain harmless, but to become conscious. And you, by walking through this dark phase rather than fleeing it, are becoming deeply, fiercely conscious. So if this truth resonates with the depth of your experience, let it be known your witness matters. What you are moving through is archetypal, meaningful, and profoundly human. And if you're ready for more of Jung's wisdom on the empath's journey, stay with this work. The path of individuation does not end with darkness. It leads, ultimately, to a self that can hold the world without losing itself, and a heart that understands love not as sacrifice, but as presence rooted in wholeness.